Andrew, formerly known as Prince, has had his gun license revoked. No more solo shooting for Mr. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Birds and wildlife heaving a sigh of relief. What is it about these royals? They're never happier than when they're killing birds, killing animals with shotguns.
On November 19th, Metropolitan Police firearms licensing officers arrived at an address in Windsor. They requested that a man in his 60s voluntarily surrender his gun certificates. According to reports, those certificates were handed over with no further comment. The man, Prince Andrew, Duke of York. And while the act itself might sound routine, the symbolism is devastating. This isn't just about shotguns or weekend shoots. It's about the final stripping away of privilege from a prince who once moved in the most exclusive circles in Britain. Because in a country where hierarchy still matters deeply, losing your firearms license isn't merely administrative. It's a public statement about trust and whether the state has any left to give. For those unfamiliar with British firearms law, this requires context. A gun certificate in Britain is not a constitutional right. It's not something you keep simply for good behavior. It's a permission granted only as long as police remain satisfied that you're fit to hold it. The legal test is blunt. If the chief officer believes a holder poses a danger to public safety or peace, the certificate can be revoked immediately. No conviction required, no trial necessary. And crucially, this wasn't handled by any police. The Metropolitan Police has a specialist role in royal and diplomatic protection. According to sources familiar with firearms licensing procedures, this makes Andrew's case different from an ordinary civilian review. This is about reputational risk, public confidence, and the modern view that firearms licensing is a public safety regime, not a lifestyle accessory for the privileged. Recent Home Office changes have explicitly tightened statutory guidance, encouraging earlier intervention when circumstances change. Which brings us to the question, what circumstances changed for Andrew? The timing is striking. According to multiple reports, the licensing action came amid Andrew's continuing public scrutiny over his association with Epstein. Material about that relationship has circulated widely again in recent months, including renewed attention to his disastrous 2019 BBC interview and the civil settlement he reached with Virginia Giuffre. While Andrew has consistently denied wrongdoing, the institutional response from the palace has been unambiguous. Removal of military titles and royal patronages. The insistence that he be known publicly as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor rather than by princely style. And now, reportedly, this. But the story goes deeper than scandal alone. According to sources close to the situation, Andrew is expected to leave Royal Lodge, his longtime Windsor residence, and relocate to more modest accommodation. And here's where firearms licensing becomes genuinely practical rather than purely symbolic. Moving house isn't just a logistical inconvenience for a certificate holder. The secure storage of firearms is legally central to British licensing regime. Certificate holders are legally required to keep police informed about where weapons are stored and under what conditions. If Andrew is relocating, that triggers fresh questions. Where will the guns be kept? Who has authorized access? What are the new security arrangements? Licensing officers are entitled, required even, to reassess suitability when circumstances change this dramatically. Whether every detail in tabloid accounts is accurate, the institutional point remains stable. A change of residence combined with heightened public controversy and security concerns creates grounds for review. What's perhaps most revealing is the cultural dimension. Shooting in certain British circles is not merely a hobby, it's social grammar. A shooting weekend is a way of signaling who belongs, who is trusted, who may be indulged in the most exclusive estates across Britain. When that privilege is removed, the effect isn't simply that one cannot participate in a sport, it's that one is excluded from a ritualized world of invitation and proximity. Former palace insiders have described how these shooting parties function as unofficial royal business, where deals are discussed, relationships maintained, and hierarchies reinforced. According to one former courtier quoted in previous reporting, you understand your standing not by what you're told, but by what you're invited to. For Andrew, losing his firearms certificate means losing access to that entire social ecosystem. The firearm certificate, then, becomes a neat emblem for Andrew's wider predicament. The modern monarchy survives by managing distance carefully. It brings working royals closer to the public through controlled visibility, and it pushes compromised figures away through controlled invisibility. Removing honors, changing styles, relocating residences, and now, reportedly, tightening access to firearms all tell the same story. The institution isn't debating guilt in a courtroom sense, it's managing risk in a constitutional sense. To be fair, we should resist treating every licensing review as covert moral judgment. Firearms licensing officers conduct routine assessments regularly. They respond to changes of circumstances. They apply statutory guidance. And in 2025, according to policy experts, the direction of travel is unmistakable. More rigorous checks, more emphasis on integrity, more willingness to revoke certificates where police judge risk has risen. Britain's system is preventative rather than punitive. It doesn't ask, has something criminal been proven? It asks, is it prudent, in the full circumstances, for this person to have access to firearms? That difference matters profoundly. Still, the optics are inescapable. Here is a man who once moved through the most privileged sphere imaginable, now asked to surrender a basic permission like any ordinary civilian facing reassessment. And in a country that still maintains extraordinary amounts of hierarchy and deference, that reversal carries weight. Behind the legal language and administrative procedures lies something more human. This is also a story about incremental exclusion, not a single dramatic fall, but the slow removal of belonging, one privilege at a time, one invitation withdrawn, one certificate surrendered. Whether that feels like justice or cruelty likely depends on your view of Andrew's conduct over the years. What remains undeniable is the method. The Metropolitan Police statement was antiseptic, almost deliberately dull. The certificates were surrendered with no further comment. There was no dramatic press conference, no accusations, just quiet, discretionary power, applied without fanfare. That's how the British state prefers to operate when it can, not with denunciations, but with licenses, guidelines, and the withdrawal of permissions. The silence isn't neutrality, silence is the method. And so, Prince Andrew finds himself in an unusual position for someone born into royalty. He's being treated, in this specific regard at least, like everyone else. The law doesn't care about pedigree. The licensing system cares about suitability. A firearm certificate is a vote of confidence from the state. When the state withdraws it, for whatever technical, practical, or preventative reason, the message received by the public is always moral. Trust has been reduced. For Andrew, that reduction has been steadily happening for years. The loss of his gun license is simply the lastest, perhaps most symbolically loaded, removal in a long series of calculated steps backward. So where does this leave him? Reportedly without military roles, without royal duties, without the style of His Royal Highness in official use, and now without the small permission that once granted him access to one of Britain's most traditional elite rituals. The question that divides people isn't really about guns at all. It's about whether association with scandal, without criminal conviction, should be enough to justify this kind of systematic exclusion. Some see measured institutional prudence. Others see punishment without trial. The monarchy's survival may depend on getting that balance right, because the public is watching how they handle their most compromised member. Whether Andrew ever finds a path back or continues this slow fade into irrelevance tells us something about what the modern royal family believes it can afford to be associated with, and perhaps more importantly, what it no longer can.